Okay, I'm going to get started. So thank you all for attending today. My name is Don Bowman. My company is Agilicus, and today we're going to talk about VPN alternatives for local governments, municipalities, the why and the how. And I'm not here to say throw the VPN in the garbage and switch to a different technology. I'm here to talk about an alternative, the right tool for the right person, the pros and cons of each. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is, but also how you would go about deploying one. So the agenda today, you obviously know your remote needs much better than I do, but I'm just going to sort of cover some of the topics about how I see it. And we're going to talk a little bit about the VPN, which has been a long-standing stalwart of getting somewhere from somewhere for some reason. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and talk about some of the notable risks for it. And this is something that's come on the agenda in the last few years, particularly since the Colonial Pipeline hack, that VPNs can be powerful tools. They can be used for good and bad and ugly, and that for some users it may not be appropriate. And to that note, I'm going to talk a little bit about VPN alternatives. What are alternate ways to achieve the same or better objective for some of those users, those task-based users that need a singular thing. And we're going to talk about a specific technology called Zero Trust that's been in the news a lot. And we're going to talk about how that helps you with authentication, multi-factor, and single sign-on for those task-based users to the task rather than the building, rather than to the network, and some of the notable benefits that come about it. So first, what are the needs? One of the things that has really intrigued me about local government, municipal government is there's a lot more disparate systems per user type than other companies. Like a small manufacturing company might have 500 employees and might have 15 systems. A small municipality might have 500 employees and 100 systems. And that's because you've got dog licenses and solid waste and wastewater and marriage licenses and all these things. And they don't really scale downwards very much. If you take some place that has 100,000 citizens and you take a place that has 1,000 citizens, they have largely the same number of underlying systems. And as a consequence, the more you scale that down, the more they rely on service partners in order to achieve their objectives. And you see this with HVAC, building management systems and facilities. You have an ice rink and somebody manages the chillers in it for you. You see it in solid waste, water, wastewater, industrial control systems that are intrinsically part of the business. And, particularly since, 2020, more and more people are wanting to be able to use those in some remote fashion for some purpose. Whether it's just to check, is the chlorine level still correct, make minor adjustments, or whether it's more wholesale. We're moving down this path where what used to be something you could do on site with a physically disconnected network, it's starting to come under some pressures. You're starting to see traditional manufacturers like John Deere wanting to become SaaS vendors, and you can't buy their equipment if you don't agree to have it connected. You're seeing the same in environments like this, where what used to be something you'd bolt to the wall and disconnect, now if the manufacturer can't reach it, they won't sell it to you. You see, the bread and butter things like the ERP, the CRM, permits, and bylaw, and these are also increasingly 100% digital. They're no longer a single app. They reach out, they have a database, and they have some analytics, and it's getting more complicated. And the key is coming back to, these local governments have a lot of systems per staff member, a lot of systems per IT person, much more so than, private industry, which is focused on a singular need, would have. And they have a lot more constituents, staff, contractors, vendors, upper and lower governments, peer governments, council. So the council is an interesting one because they're not employees of the city, but they're also not quite the same as people on the street. Each of these things has a different scope, has different risks, and it has different controls. And this is one of the areas that the VPN challenges because it's not really good at scope or controls. It's sort of on or off. So if we talk about a VPN, VPNs have been around really for a really long time. The first internet was actually all VPN driven, the frame relay and long distance dial-up. but it's really just a long Ethernet cable. It's the easiest way to model it. I'm connecting my network to your network, and therefore I can do the same things here that I could there. And it's really, really a good solution for people that need very broad access. If I need access to everything, you may as well use a VPN. That's kind of your IT staff. But that all or nothing nature, it's really not necessarily appropriate for people that have a single task to get done. I am the company that works for the system integrator that built the water treatment plant, and we are performing a scheduled update on 2 of the PLCs to change the timing on the pumps. You don't really need VPN access to the ERP system in order to achieve this. So that task-based worker, the VPN is an overbroad access. This has been around for a long time, but it also dates to an era where you thought about singular company, my company. When you start talking about, I've got these partners, not all users are alike anymore, and I might give different permissions to an MSP that supports me. They can do help desk related things. To an industrial company that supports me, they can do stuff with my HMI. Suddenly the VPN is really challenged by that because it's really a layer 3 technology. It's all on for everybody. And I know you can do ACLs to limit it a little bit, but it's very, very challenging eventually to segment the network that way. So the good parts about the VPN, these are all why people like it. It just works. It's like being there. There's no additional steps. Once I'm connected, it's done. I can leave it running forever. I don't have to worry about things getting in my way. The transport is encrypted. I don't have to worry about running something over HTTP because I know the transport's encrypted for me. I trust the vendor. I trust the technology. No one ever got fired for deploying a VPN. Well, I bet you there's people that no longer work for Colonial Pipeline and their partners entirely because of that VPN. So it's probably not a true statement. So the bad. Think about it from your partner's standpoint. So you are the local government and you say, I've chosen XYZ VPN technology. You tell all your partners, just install the client, thanks. And they say, look, I can't do that. I mean, I support a lot of different people and I can only have one VPN installed and it can't be yours, or the licensing doesn't work that way, or my company policy doesn't allow that, or et cetera. You get in this fight about that. Sometimes it's about the device. Hey, we use Macs, you only have a Windows version, or we use tablets or what have you. But some of the things that people don't know about, people say my video calls break up when the VPN is up. I've done a really great YouTube video that explains why that is, but it comes down to routing. With the VPN, typically you don't use split horizon routing. It's all on. You bring the VPN up and now your traffic all flows into the company and then back out. The more people on the VPN, the less bandwidth they get. And when they're talking to each other on Microsoft Teams or Google Meet, they can start to complain about it. But also just stuff they do on the side like YouTube, it chews into that bandwidth. Sometimes that means they say things like, I can't print at home because the VPN has removed local connectivity. And I know you can deploy split horizon VPNs, but then you open yourselves up to a whole slew of attack vectors that you have to kind of analyze. Does that mean that somebody can inject stuff into DNS and capture my traffic and make it go outside of the VPN? Can they inject more finely grained routes and then et cetera? It becomes complicated. What about subnets overlapping? Today in IPv4, we all use private IP space, RFC 1918, and you see it as 192.168 or 10 dot something, and your partner does. So you don't think about it from a home user standpoint. Everybody in your street has the same IP addresses inside their house. I guarantee it, because it all came from D-Link the same way. When you VPN together, you have to agree on that set to not overlap. And again, on an individual case, you can make it happen. You can tell all your home users, use 172.16/12 and you're good. But when you have a set of partners and they work with a set of people like you, they can't really calibrate their machine for you and everybody else, and it becomes complicated. They will push back and say, look, I can't be installing all of this different software. And then the other thing they're going to push back on the VPN is the dirty secret is the shared account. Let's just create a single VPN account. The applications are all perfectly hardened, right? So we just agree we'll have one VPN account. I'll share it across everybody that's supporting you. A lot of risk with that. But the really ugly parts, you're importing their business risk into your business risk, and you're exporting your business risk into theirs. It's a bidirectional thing. Who knows what's on the remote network? Do they run antivirus at all? Do they run the same one you do? Do they have outdated browsers? Do they have bad practices? But when they're connected to your network, what they do is the same as if you did it on your network. Ransomware, if they're connected in, it's going to walk through it. The same discovery mechanisms apply because it's layer 3. It can scan the network. It can look for open SMB shares. It can, buffer overflows on RPC services, etc. The VPN is not about fine-grained authentication. It's a coarse-grained tool. It's an Ethernet cable, not a access token. It's on for everything. And there's no fine-grained audit. There's no users other than the VPN user itself, but there's no users on a per transaction basis. And as a consequence, a lot of the world's eyes were opened when the gas pump started to go. Sorry, the motion detecting light in this room. Stupid thing. The gas stations started to go dry in the United States. The entire eastern seaboard of the biggest economy in the world, they found they had this sort of clustered risk. There was a lot of that, because of just-in-time technologies, not a lot of inventory out there. And what happened was a contractor had VPN access for legitimate reasons, and multiple people in that contractor did, and malware was able to come in through that, and bad things occurred. I guarantee, without knowing the inside, that today their VPN practice is different. They probably still have a VPN, and they probably have alternatives for specific needs like that contractor. But for those who remember Douglas Adams and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, don't panic. There are other approaches. I'm not here to say ditch the VPN or turn it all off and put tinfoil on your head. And neither am I here to say there's no solution at all for those task-based workers, because there is. So if we define what the happy space is, the sort of nirvana, what would you say is it? So you're a task-based worker. My job is to support the water treatment plant chemical addition. Every hour I check it, I make a note, and I make minor changes. My job is to manage the backup system. I need to make sure that there's tapes in the tape drive and it hasn't failed and there's nobody with machines that haven't been on for a certain amount of time, etc. For those task-based workers, they say, look, I access only the resources I need. I don't need to know about the rest of your network. Just show me on some dashboard the 5 things I'm allowed to use, and I don't really care about the rest. Second is, you shouldn't care where I am. I might be in a cafe, I might be in Starbucks, I might be in the drive-thru somewhere, I might be on an aircraft. That's my problem, not your problem. So, we're not going to agree on coming from this IP. We're not going to agree on anything like that. I'm where I am. Make that secure, and there's nothing about my network that's interesting to you. The third thing they say is, I choose my devices. You have no input in that. So you can't tell me what they are, what version they are, what type they are, etc. I know you want to put your software on my machine, but that's not our business relationship. Our business relationship is I do this task for you, not that you tell me that I need to run Windows 7 unpatched because of how your VPN is too old to be upgraded or something. It's not my problem. And then they also say, look, I know I've got a really strong username and password. I got my own identity system. I work for a company too. You've got your Azure Active Directory. You sign in as Jane at my city. Well, I sign in as Don at my company. I don't want a second username and password. I'm going to end up putting them on a spreadsheet. I guarantee it. I work for 30 companies in this role as a task-based worker. If you each tell me that you've created an account for me, I'm going to have to write it down. And is that what you want? It's going to sit there on my desk, probably on my desktop as a file. I'll open it, passwords.txt. Is that what you want? You don't really want that, right? And then the flip side of that equation is you have to be able to accept this in a secure fashion for you. Well, I need multi-factor, so it's okay for you to sign in with your credentials to your single sign-on provider, but I need to have multi-factor. I need to be able to authorization so you can only get to the things you're allowed to do and only do things you're allowed to do. So this comes down to this very simple mantra with a lot of alliteration. Any user, any application, any device, any network. If you can make that work and achieve your security objectives, then everybody wins. And it's a non-zero-sum game. So this is the promise of zero trust. By switching the paradigm from you're in my network, now what, to you're allowed to do A on system B, and boom, it's as if you were there, you can achieve this objective, and it's non-zero-sum. It's simpler for them. It's more secure for you. It's cheaper this is actually better for everybody in this ecosystem. This is what the promise of Zero Trust is. The promise of a VPN alternative is to say for users that don't access everything on a habitual basis like the IT troubleshooter, but instead stick to a specific swim lane. You know, I manage the website, I manage this, I am bylaw, etc. This is much easier for everybody. And that way they can, I don't know, sit on that couch. It doesn't look very comfortable, to be honest, but use their tablet, use their phone, be wherever they are. If they're in a truck and pull over to the side of the road and use your HMI to achieve the objective, if the backup provider is sitting in a center with a lot of screens, and the call center person that picks up your phone logs into the backup with you, the objective is achieved and security is there. So, I've alluded to this a number of times. National Institute of Standards Technology has standardized the implementation and terms around Zero Trust. It's a concept that's been out there for a little bit, but in a nutshell, it sounds super complicated. It's actually super easy. There's three things you got to remember: who, what, and how. The first is who. Who is this person that I'm proposing to talk to? Let's not get into what they're allowed to do or how I get there, but just who are they? And when we talk about who, this is called identity, and something attests to your identity. So if you're looking to go into a movie and you've got a ticket and you show the ticket, that's your identity. You don't need more than that. If you're pulled over by the police for going a little fast and they want to be able to make sure that they got the right person, that's a driver's license. In an online world, we talk about identity providers, and the biggest two out there, there's a lot of them, the biggest two out there are Microsoft and Google. And everybody on planet Earth that is online has an account with one of those two, even though they may tell you otherwise. They actually do, because they have a mobile phone, can't use it without it. And users see this as sign in with, that's how they interact with stuff. In your personal life, you may see a blog, sign in with Google or what have you, and that's what it's talking about. So Google is Google Workspace, which is the professional, which is what we use at our company, but it's also the consumer, which is Gmail. Microsoft is the professional, it's Azure Active Directory, but it's also on-premise Active Directory, and it's also personal, Skype and Xbox Live and those types of accounts. There's a technical process called OpenID Connect. Some people also use SAML, but OpenID Connect, which handles this for you. If you have a system which can accept multiple sources of identity, then you can allow Jane at contractor and Joe at city peer access. Neither one is disadvantaged. They each use single sign-on. They each sign in their natural way. They don't have passwords.txt on their desktop. You should want that. And the reason is, when that contracting code company fires Jane for something, they're going to take her out of their identity system immediately. And you're not going to need to have this hookup where, you had this shared password, I got to go take it out of my Active Directory. She's gone. And that's the end of it. She's gone. So that's the who part of the problem. If you can have a way to individually identify every user, now you need to know whether you want to talk to them or not, whether they're allowed to do anything. And that's called authorization, the what problem. What are you allowed to do? So it's easy to say, okay, Jane at contractor is somebody I'm agreeing to do something with. Okay, now Jane is allowed to edit the graphics on the website. We use WordPress. That's how we've done it. Okay, it's on-prem. Okay, however it works. So that what problem comes down to a type of firewall in your network or in the application or both. We propose it being in the network. That way there's no integration. It's really simple to deploy an identity-aware proxy looks after this for you. But you as the administrator, you control the rules. Jane can access my network, but only if she's supplied a second factor and she's logging in from within the continental United States and she's editing media on the web server, but nothing else. Boom, that's what we allow. So that's the what part of it. And then there's the how. So the how is how we get there. So going back to my example of a person pulled over to the side of the road in a truck with a tablet, and there's a human-machine interface inside the water treatment plant that's a long way away. The water treatment plant is behind an LTE modem and doesn't allow inbound connectivity, not that you would want to, et cetera, et cetera. The how do I get Jane at contractor, identified through Azure, allowed what to use the VNC of the HMI to the to there, And that's something that we have a specific technology for. Our connector, it makes an outbound only connection, brings it into something called WebSocket, interfaces with that firewall, and that allows you to get to that spot that's otherwise you would have to VPN to. It's behind something. So you're not opening an inbound IP. It's not some sort of demilitarized zone. It's not port forwarding. Every single transaction, you know who, you know what they're doing, you're allowing, and you're getting it to that. And the user sees it as if they were on the public internet. So the user sees it as, I just open up vnc.mycity.com and boom, it's there. From their standpoint, they're sitting on their couch, they're in their truck, they're on LTE, they're in Starbucks, or wherever they are. Their IP is irrelevant. There is no tunnel to be brought up and down. It's just always on, which was the promise we got when we got broadband. That was the biggest single difference, switching from dial-up to broadband, is you went from connecting to the internet to being connected all the time. You want your applications to behave the same way. That was the promise that SaaS brought us, is, you know, look, I can use my email from anywhere. I can use this tool from anywhere. So if we reimagine, there's this conceptual model called the air gap. And in a true air gap, and I am a bit of a purist here, a true air gap has no connectivity inbound or outbound. So we are sort of mucking with the word a little bit here to say, you know, the modern implementations of air gaps are often not pure. Coming back to the John Deere business model, if you work with Siemens today and you buy their equipment, you have agreed to give them network connectivity to it. We're far from an air gap at this stage, so it's somewhat porous. But if you imagine this environment, it shouldn't matter whether you've got a vendor at their office or an employee at your headquarters. They should each have access to the things they need and nothing more. So even if their machine gets infected with malware, the blast radius is reduced to what they're allowed to access, what they currently have an access token for. So if all they've done is created an access token for one thing, this dashboard at this, you know, certain network at the bottom, then that machine gets compromised. You have an audit trail, because the VPN doesn't have an audit trail. It's connected, and now I don't know where they went afterwards. Here you have one. You know exactly what's happened. You know where they went, who did it, when, and you can revoke that. And that's really a strong statement. That's what Zero Trust is all about, is making it so that the path for the user and resource with the authorization are all individual. The perfect microsegmentation. So why does this reduce risk? So, you know, if some of it is around human behavior, we all want to be efficient. Nobody wants to say, look, I want you to have to spend a lot of time clicking around and using tools you don't like because haha. So when you have a water treatment plant that's a long way out of town and it's kind of dark and the roads aren't well lit and you got a bunch of people that need to support it, they're going to find a way. They're going to sneak TeamViewer in there with a cellular modem, and something like that's going to happen. So if you make that so easy that they don't have to do it, and you have all the controls you need, suddenly you've reduced your risk. One of the biggest risks you've reduced is the shared account. If they can sign in as Jane at contractor and Don at contractor, there's no reason to create a contractor account that is shared with the entire company, right? Why would I do that? This means I have trust but verified. Back to Reagan, I can point my finger at who did what when, and they're more likely to do the right thing, but also I can make the permissions more fine-grained, etc. Getting rid of shared accounts, huge risk off your back. This way, if somebody leaves that company on bad terms, their HR is going to remove them from the identity provider. You won't even necessarily need to know that's occurred, and boom, they're gone. Overbroad access, like the VPN, it's sort of like giving somebody a physical hard key to your facility. You know, you might trust them, but you don't really know where they've been. The VPN is exactly that. It's a hard key to your entire facility. So the blast radius is literally everything. With Zero Trust, the blast radius is that access token, that user, that resource, and it's not further. You have a perfect audit trail here. So now I know who did what when exactly, as opposed to who connected the VPN and left it up for the week. You can enforce multi-factor. So in this model, you can add multi-factor on. You know, you'll see one of the things I look at is the MSP forum on Reddit, and they talk a lot about effectively defeating multi-factor. My team manages this customer, and they're asking for multi-factor. How do I share the multi-factor across my entire team? Well, the answer is you're not supposed to. And they come up with these ways. Well, let's force them to use SMS. We'll have this SMS reflector, and that way the code will go to all of us at once. It's one of the reasons I suggest to people never use SMS for multi-factor. It's not very secure. use the YubiKey, use your fingerprint, use WebAuthn, use a code generator, but don't do that. But in this case, you can say, you use your identity provider, but I force you to supply multi-factor, and that way phishing kind of disappears with multi-factor. It's really hard to do. Once you remove that VPN, only the resources you care about and their network protocol are accessible, so you don't have to worry about something else in your organization that is really unsuitable for any other usage. But also, there's a monetary benefit here. No shared software, licenses, etc. You don't have to manage that, so you don't have to worry about telling them to update and patch, and do your licenses allow you to do that with your vendors and so on. You can just say, look, it's all web browser based, and keep your browser up to date, thanks. And their organization is going to be doing that anyway. So coming down to the how do you implement this? It's a little Gantt chart on the right, and I scratched out weeks and put in hours. With systems like ours, which from Agillicus, which is a identity-aware web application firewall, it's an identity-aware proxy. You're not changing anything in the network. You're able to instantly trust users from your identity provider, Azure, on-prem, however, Google, etc., but also all of your partners. And there's a requests workflow where they can request permission. They say, may I please access this thing? And you get paged. Yeah, of course you can do that. But that unified authentication, it's so much easier to train the end users when there's no additional credentials, particularly when there are multiple companies involved. So if they sign in their natural way, they sign in less often, so there's a lot less complaints about the fatigue of that. But also, there's no integration points here. That's the really neat thing about this standard. You don't have to go and configure Azure Active Directory to allow this. It is an identity provider. With a system like ours, you can just immediately sign in as JNet contractor, and it works the first time. You don't have to do any setup. And it works with other things. I've talked about Google and Microsoft a lot. Okta has a really good product in this area that federates different identity providers, and there's other strategies out there. But the key is, this is an integration-free exercise because it's done in the network layer rather than going to each application and visiting it and enabling single sign-on or SAML or OpenID Connect. You just do it once in the middle. The second is that precise authorization. So, when what we propose, it's on a per resource and even sub basis. You could say, you have read-only access to this VNC. You can get files from this website, but you can't put files there. With respect to a share, you can read, but you can't write. It's very, very precise path and so on. And you came down to like employee ID. You could say, hey, we've got their pay stub system, and you can only see pay stubs that the record matches yours and cryptographically done. But that precise authorization, this is why you're able to trust other people's identity providers. I'm confident that Contractor Co. knows Jane works for them, but I need to own what Jane is allowed to do. I can't outsource that. That's what I own, and that's that precise authorization. That's the split between the who and the what. And the seamless access, by moving everything into browser-oriented SSL, internet, public IP, there's no longer a concern about overlapping IP space or NAT or firewalls that are restrictive or, et cetera. It's all, the end user sees it as publicly accessible, and you see it as no inbound traffic occurs unless it's for an authorized user that has identified themselves to your satisfaction. So as a consequence, you've really got almost nothing to do here. You have no IP changes, no software to deploy everywhere on your site, no integration with the existing software on your site, and no integration with this. There's a SaaS-based offering, there's a connector that runs and installs within the site that facilitates it. And then after that, it's really just configuring the web interface and saying, this group of users can do this, these people are allowed to ask for access on demand, etc. And you're kind of there. Coming back to VPN alternative, is this a replacement for the IT team needing to log in late at night to diagnose something? Not necessarily. But is this a better way for the company that manages the ice rink equipment to work with you? Absolutely it is. So that was my little soapbox pitch today. I would love to take any questions in the chat if people have them. I would also love to take them offline. So there's lots of different ways to engage with Agillicus. Our motto is do, learn, teach. A big part of my job is, I need to I need to do something, and now I kind of understand it, and then I go and learn more about it, and then I have to teach other people about it, and that's a virtuous cycle. And it's really something I reinforce with my team. We got a lot of videos on YouTube. There's something like 70 of them there. They're not all great, and some of them are really great. And they each talk about different topics. Some of them talk very deeply on web application firewalls, web application security, content security policies. Some talk about remote access. Some talk about zero trust. You can engage with webinars like this one. We run a fair number of them. And then on the right-hand side, there's a bunch of case studies of other folks just like yourselves that have gone through a journey of zero trust and what they've learned along the way, and what they saw value in. And there's a little chat icon on the website. People are welcome to use it. It's a real human on my team that answers that. People, that's the number one question. Are you a robot? The answer is no. So sometimes we can't answer it because we're having lunch. But, there's always somebody available there to talk. Is this for me? We'd love to engage with you either one-on-one or in a group, or it's maybe face-to-face in a future setting. And if all else fails, if you email info@agilicus.com, we'll get back to you. So Drew from my team has just posted one of our case studies with the city of Kenosha, Wisconsin in the chat here, and there's others on the site. If there's any questions, I'll take them now here. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time today. I know your time is very valuable to you. And again, we would absolutely love to engage with you. If you think that I'm wrong, challenge me. If you think that I'm almost right, educate me. And if you think that we can help you in some way, it's really something our team would love to do. So with that, thank you for attending the Agilicus webinar today on VPN alternatives for local government. And peace out.